We made it. I'm a little worse for wear, but we're okay. I've got my coffee.
Coffee solves all, especially when it's from a Janeway mug.
Exactly. Hey, domestic. Awesome. Okay, so we have some great episodes to talk about.
We really do.
I'm excited to talk about these. We'll kind of let some people filter in. If you haven't watched this before, Samantha's watching Star Trek for the first time. We've watched Picard, Discovery, and Voyager. Voyager was your first one, right?
Yeah.
Hey, woo, the game's
No,
on.
hi. Yeah, Voyager was the first series of Star Trek I ever watched, ever.
Yeah, which is awesome. Excellent choice.
Great way to start.
Yes, and I may or may not have had a say in that.
Right. And I didn't know anything, so I was like, okay, that works.
It works, but no, it was really
And then, yeah, so when it started, I was like, where's Spock?
Right. But yeah, now we are almost done with TNG.
Can't believe it. It's really, we've been plowing through. It's been awesome.
We have. It's been really, really fun. It's fun for me too, because it's, a lot of these when I go back and rewatch, I'll just skip over ones that I, don't like as much or don't necessarily remember. And so I'm finding new ones. And yes, indeed. Yeah. Best Raktaginos at Star Trek Las Vegas. Oh, so Raktajino is the DS9 coffee. It's Klingon coffee. But they drink it a lot in Deep Space Nine. And then at Star Trek Las Vegas, they make Raktajino cocktails.
Oh, yum. I don't even know what it tastes like, but I said yum because it's a cocktail, so therefore.
Yeah, it's like a coffee blended alcoholic delight.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man. Well, good. I'm glad you're enjoying the rewatch as well, Mohammed.
Yeah.
It's been fun. So, so today we're going to talk about attached, force of nature, inheritance, parallels, the Pegasus, and Homeward. So, it's going to be fun. These are some really good ones. These are some really, really good ones.
This was a really good grouping. We had a couple, not so great groupings. So this one was good.
Slightly less strong.
Yes.
I think the last 2 weeks, which surprised me, because I always think of the latter TNG as being pretty good, but...
Oh, yeah, it is.
Man, the beginning of season 7 was a bit of an adventure.
Yes, it was. You can say that.
6, yeah. All right. So let's talk about attached then. So this is the one where Picard and Crusher are on an alien world and they're trapped there, and then they slowly discover that they're able to read each other's minds. It is brilliant fodder for the Picard Crusher shippers out there. And for me, I love it because it's like watching a episode of fan fiction, which I'm all majorly.
I kind of, yeah. I got that.
So what were your thoughts on this one?
I mean, well, Beverly and Picard just made, I think in your notes you said this makes so much more sense than any of the other people that they've tried to put him with, and it's like it really does. But then she kind of, it was sort of like this was a little bubble of fantasy, and now we are going to step away again. And it was like, oh, but also realistic. But really, this was one of the first times I feel like it was, the exposition was about how planets get into the Federation.
Yeah.
I wasn't fully, up to speed on really. I kind of got it, but this was, the entire world is like these two species basically, and one of them doesn't want anything to do with it. That's this one, right? There were two like that in this series.
No, this is the one with the two that are sort of at war with each other.
Right. Yeah. And one of them's like this, very closed xenophobic type society, it seemed like, and then the other one that wants to be in, I really liked how this sort of explained to me. It was a good way of seeing how the Federation chooses who's going to be in the Federation and all of the criteria. And by the end, they're like, we can't accept you. Riker's like, this is what my report will say. We can't accept you because you're still I don't know, I can't remember what he says, but there were high reasons why they won't accept them at this time, because they still need to evolve, basically.
Right, that it's basically like their own planetary politics are too unstable,
right, to
be able to be trusted to be like a diplomatic member of these other planets. That's cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm really warm.
Do it. So I really liked that. I think that really was a important realization for me. I think it was thinking of it as entire, worlds or entire planets, not just individual countries.
Right.
And that, I liked it.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
exactly. But like, you basically have to you have to be able to have your whole species be represented, essentially. Right. And that is an interesting point. And one where it's like, well, you wouldn't be able to do that,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. I was like, whoa, boy, that is futuristic.
Yep. That hard mirror facing ourselves right now. But, yeah. I mean, for me, like I said, they've tried to pair Picard with other women in the last kind of dozen episodes that we've watched. There's the one where he like falls in love with the astrometrics assignee on the ship. And their chemistry was not great. And then there was the one that was basically like a misery type entrapment situation where she was like, I want you to love me. Yeah. And that one, it just didn't work. But then they've done a great job, I think, of like laying that underlying chemistry between them over the years.
They really have. Yeah. And so that's what I think part of what made it feel so natural for them to be, together. And they're like adults talking about it, right. And like
communication.
Who'da thunk?
Exactly. And I think that's what I like about it so much too, is that they have a very realistic conversation, and one where it's like it doesn't feel awkward, like when he's, when she reads his mind and she's like, why did you feel weird about, it's like she knows the answer. She just wants, and she's known it for a long time, she just wants him to confirm it.
Right.
So it's not like, oh my God, are you in love with me? It's just,
exactly,
are you in love with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does work really well. For me, as a avid supporter and reader of fan fiction, it's just one of the best tropes where it's like, suddenly they can read minds.
I know. And that was so kind of like cheesy, but at the same time enjoyable,
Adorable. Yeah, I love it. And I think too, one of probably my favorite scenes in this is when she's mentioning breakfast and she's like, wait a minute, you don't like our breakfast together? And then he's like trying to kind of cover it. She's like, I can read your mind. I know you don't like our breakfast together. And he's like, they're just so elaborate all the time. And it was such like a cute, genuine, like it was like a couple conversation,
It
like
was, yeah.
Early relationship type conversation. Dr. Ina, I agree too that they kind of confirmed, this was a good way to kind of confirm the relationship Picard had with Jack and like their, friendship and how their relationship all evolved over the time. Yes, Christoph, it is fine to have Voyager on the background while we're talking about TNG.
That is fully acceptable.
Yeah, I keep meaning to tweet this and I keep forgetting, but my partner's 8-year-old, his kids have been here for a couple months, and I got called out by her that she was like, she came up to see what I was doing, and it was like I was reading a Star Trek script, I had Star Trek on, I was wearing a Star Trek t-shirt and drinking out of a Star Trek mug, and she just basically was like, I think you have too much Star Trek. I think this is too much.
This is too much Star Trek as a noun and a verb and an adverb.
All the things. But didn't stop me. I just was super called out.
Yeah.
Thanks, child. I really like this one. I'm not like a hardcore shipper of, oh, thanks, Uncle Bill. I'm not a hardcore, Beverly Picard shipper. I think but I think it works. Like, I can see why people are. I definitely get it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's fun. It's a good one. Yeah,
a lot of confirmation in the chat about no such thing as Star Trek.
Everyone's like, yeah, that described my day. So thanks, Christoph.
Hard agree.
Yeah,
Hard
exactly. Agree. Awesome. Any other, like, yeah, I did like this episode. So overall, basically, you got to learn a little bit more about the Federation, and I guess I hadn't really thought about that much, but we really didn't have that in Voyager. Definitely didn't have that in Discovery, because they're sort of kind of the original series type thing of just, this is how we are. Because I guess they do that a little bit more in Deep Space Nine, just because of the political turmoil that's going on in that sector. But interesting.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Fan fiction fodder. Okay, so next one we're going to talk about is the Force of Nature. So this is the one scientifically, I'm going to geek out a little bit. So just a little bit of warning there.
I really like this episode.
Good. Awesome. Yeah, this is the one where they're flying through this region, and they basically like find these like subspace buoy type things that then explode, and they were set as traps. And they were set as traps by these brother and sister who are scientists, and they're basically like, we have to stop ships from coming through the sector. Subspace is like, or space-time is like completely unstable, and people going to warp is going to destroy our entire environment. So it's kind of like one of these environmental type episodes, is kind of the subtext behind it, but I really like it. So you did too.
I did. Yeah. I just thought it was, obviously, like you just said, an environmental sort of, it was like an allegory for climate change, it seemed like to me, at least in today's 2020 world, that's how I was seeing it. And interesting that, that they wouldn't have known or didn't know that, that warp drive was having this effect on the environment, on the, space environment. And interesting how, Geordi was like kind of feeling offended or like unsure of himself, and was like, why didn't I know this? Why didn't I catch this?
Yeah.
And like the lady scientist literally like dies for her belief in this, and she was right. And I wasn't sure she was going to be right up to the end, and that when she was, it was kind of this like, oh, we really do need to look at this very closely. I just thought it was good storytelling, and really strong characters.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think because it was an interesting concept too, because we kind of take that for granted that space is so big, but they lay it out really well by saying, there are these anomalies, there's only like small directions that you're able to go through this area, and so because all these ships have gone through that very specific corridor to, because that's the only really safe, secure way to travel, then it's just destabilized it. And so the science, so I get asked about this episode a lot, if this could be a thing, and I kind of like it. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily something that like mathematically we've looked at, to look at how strain on space-time could change over time, but they essentially, like, if we take the fabric of space-time analogy, and I'm not going to say the drinking word because I'm very hungover and thinking about alcohol is not my jam right now. But taking this sort of fabric thing that if you stretch it over time, it's like a sweater, right? That it's just going to loosen up and it's going to become like unstable and it's going to eventually fall apart. And so I really like that. Like, I think that works. That if you're going into warp all the time and you're stretching this space-time, that kind of makes sense. So yeah, I'm glad you like this one. I think the brother and sister I agree, are good, and I think that this is something that they were able to do some character development for Geordi that they've struggled with before, and that was to give him more of like a crisis of faith, of faith being, you know, his engineering.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Muhammad pointed out that we rarely hear about the speed limit after this one, and that's kind of true. That's interesting.
Yeah, we don't, and I like, I think in the last episode of this bunch, Picard says something like, "You have permission to do full warp or go at full warp," and it doesn't even say like, because it's we're allowing you to. It's just like, we can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really interesting. We have to talk about the subplot because it's one of my favorite scenes ever. Which is the cold open for this episode is basically Geordi bringing Spot back to Data and being like, "I can never watch your cat again. I'm not ready for a cat." He's like, "Your cat is a menace," and destroyed everything, scratched up his furniture, knocked stuff over, and it's so good. It's so funny.
It's so funny. I love it.
It's so great. And
Spot is definitely one of the best characters.
For sure. And I love when they're crawling through the Jeffries tubes having this conversation about like training and stuff, and Geordi's like, he's like, "Well, set your phaser to stun." And Data just completely deadpan is like, "Geordi, I cannot stun my cat." And it's so great. And then Brilliant. Likewise, when you see him, you know, I think a lot of people have quoted this before too, with their cats on their computers and everything, is like, "This is down is good. This is up is no." It's so funny.
It's just brilliant. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, just so good. It's adorable, and I love. I just get a kick out of Data, you know, having a cat. I just think that, you know, because you saw the Doctor and Seven try to go through and find their humanity, and, you know, this being an underlying thing of these major Star Trek series, and having a pet is like one that they hadn't really done, and it's really cute. I love it.
It's great. I love Spot.
Yeah. So yeah, anything else on this one?
Not really.
Yeah, it's a good one, and I think, like, I guess thinking about kind of closing it out is the you know, it's what's the right approach to get people to pay attention to this sort of thing, you know, that at what point do you get to those extremes, that it was like that they literally are setting traps for ships and trying to just like scare them and say, "Pay attention to us, you need to stop doing this," and that was really the only effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like the again, not like the violent protest approach to, you know, climate change or other things that are going on. It's like, how else can we get you to pay attention? I'm forgetting the name of, there was a violent group, I don't want to say violent, but like in the 70s or something, there was a climate change group that was like doing stuff. Why can't I think of it? But it's kind of that analogy. Yeah,
it is. And I think it's a really interesting one. And but I think too, this was I think you mentioned, even though it's relatable now in 2020 with climate change, I think it was the same thing in the 90s. You know, that was when that sort of discussion started happening, and we were getting like, you know, movies like Fern Gully and you know, and
absolutely,
and this episode was around then as well. So, he's Stemish. I don't know if they ever fixed that issue. I think that it was one of those things where they certainly never bring it. This is one of those that, you know, they mention it and then they never really come back to it again. But in the story, I could see it being one of, like, the way that they talked about how to close it out was essentially like, now Geordi's aware of this and he's taking it really seriously, and they you know, log it, I guess, and hope that scientists
they recalibrate the warp drive.
Right.
Things. Well, recalibrate's about the only word I know.
So, yeah, we have a challenge now in the chat to ask me how to fix this issue. I think, you know, it's one of those things that it's when it's done, it's irreparable. Again, it's using that fabric analogy to an extreme. But you'd have to be able to like stitch it back together or find some way to stabilize it, but then you're still not able to necessarily travel through it in the same way. So I think, you know, the way that they talked about maybe these corridors that are frequently traveled is just having more of a you know, an eye on where people are going, how often they're traveling through it, and then putting in a warning, you know, to, you know, maybe have a speed limit, or just say, hey, if you're traveling from point A to point B, you can only go this fast and you can only allow X amount per.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how you would fix
regulating the traffic through the channels.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's cool.
Mm.
So yeah, I think Dr. Ina mentioned that it would be interesting to have a social science type panel about Star Trek governance, diplomacy, failure, leadership. I think, yeah, that would be, I think that there are a lot of really cool, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Me too.
And yeah, people can't seem to remember where Spot came from. Mikhail
He did just kind of appear, I feel like.
Maybe it was Tasha, when you mentioned it was Tasha Yar's cat, that kind of rung a bell, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna look it up because this is gonna drive us crazy.
I would love to see the autocomplete of if you just Google where it does Spot.
No kidding. It first appears in the episode Data's Day. It doesn't seem, at least there's nothing quick that just says, although there's some quality things that pop up if you search for Spot on TNG. Yeah, Mikhail, I like that. And I think that that's sort of when it actually tears and ruptures, like there's a way to repair these subspace ruptures that that have occurred otherwise, not necessarily caused by warp travel, but it's never going to be the same. Maybe not able to travel through it. So, interesting. Yeah. And I love all the Spot stuff. All right. So the next episode we're going to talk about is Inheritance. This is the one with the fabulous Irish actress, Fionnuala. I have friends who are named Fionnuala. Fionnuala Flanagan, and it just trips me up when I stare at it versus saying it. So I need to not read it. It's just Fionnuala Flanagan. She basically shows up for, you know, this planet is starting to not be able to be survivable, so they go to it, and they get this scientists off of the planet, one of whom is this woman, Juliana, in the episode, and she basically claims to have been Noonien Soong's ex-wife and helped invent Data. So she sees Data as her son, and he sees her as his mother. Interesting episode. I like this. I do like this episode. I tend to not be as drawn to the Data origin Noonien Soong type stuff, and I think it's just because I get distracted by Brent Spiner playing all the characters that it's hard for me to focus on the actual story. Not that he doesn't do a great job, it's just distracting for me. But this is a good episode.
Yeah, I liked this episode. I'm also less into the Data origin storyline. It just seems a little bit like kind of like I would have mentioned in Picard. Like the whole season of Picard is not about Picard; it's about Data. And right. I'm feeling the same way about Next Gen, and it's a little bit heavy-handed, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. Interesting.
And just kind of overdone for me. Also, it seems like every time people are introduced into his story, they just kind of act odd. Like, of course, she just revealed to be an android, but they just kind of like act like strangely not normal. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah. Their behavior is bizarre.
It is, and yeah, and I don't know, like, I always just go back to Measure of Man. I was like, is this person like obsessed with Data because they're anti-android or whatever? Like, it's just they have a weird behavior pattern.
Yeah.
But also, like, Sung is like not my favorite character at all. This was so creepy.
Yeah,
I'm
real.
sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I liked the episode. It was well written. It was well done. But like,
peace damage. That's funny. Alton Brown Sung. Yeah, I mean, and so maybe just thinking about it, not from a story standpoint, but from like a behind the scenes making a show character type standpoint. I think that it's hard to write and act interactions with a fully sentient android because we haven't had those. And so, especially when the plot revolves around people who play major roles or are just fascinated, you know, like when you saw Julian Bashir from Deep Space Nine interact with Data,
right,
which again was also kind of a weird interaction. He's like, you're breathing, you have a pulse, you know, and it was like all those little nuances that he was picking up on. But I think it's just hard to write that, you know, it's like, okay, now pretend to be awed by this human who's, you know, this actor who's playing a droid who's behaving completely human, that you're just like, okay,
yeah, that's actually a good point. That's probably very true.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's true, but the story is creepy. Like, I mean, again, an ethical shit show is kind of how I phrased it. That it's like, it's a disaster that they essentially, so did she die or she left him? No, she died. Yeah, she suffered an accident. He basically made an android version of her, and Noonien Sung made an android version of her, put all of her memories and emotions and everything into this android, didn't tell her that she was actually an android. And then when she decided to leave him, he basically was like, well, she would have left my actual wife would have left me, I guess. So I'll let her go. Never tell her that she's actually an android. And then Data makes the same, and then has this chip in there for anyone who finds her to explain what happened. And then Data basically like repairs her broken arm and is like, okay, you're fine. Bye. Your arm broke, but you're all good. And he loved you, and never tells her that she's not human.
I mean, to be fair, he wants to, but as convinced, or he wants to, and then I think he convinces himself that he shouldn't, just by, you know, everyone else's input.
Yeah, and kind of processing what the holograph from Noonien Sung said. Peace Demish. It's basically, I mean, it did set up at least the conclusion of Picard in that technology is possible. That you can be turned into an android, but still have, you know, finality, I guess. I don't know.
Right. It's I did like the build up of Data realizing, you know, and he's noticing little things like her blink pattern and her so that's the only thing I can remember right now, but that was pretty cool.
But he's suspicious of her the whole time, you know. When she tells him this, he's like, I feel like my father, who's now implanted, you know, dream ability and all this stuff into me, would have mentioned you. Right, exactly. And I liked that too, that he was suspicious, and that is not something I would see him being in the earlier seasons. Yeah. Like, he's grown to be more pragmatic, I guess, in his approach, as opposed cynical.
To cynical. That too.
Yeah.
The music, because she played it perfectly the same exact second time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is interesting. And I forgot to mention, too, when I was mentioning Fiona LaFlanagan, she also, so she guested on an episode of Deep Space Nine, and she guested on an episode of Enterprise. But she's also in one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Waking Ned Devine. And if you haven't seen that, it's an adorable, wholesome Irish film that I highly recommend. Waking Ned. I think it's like Waking Ned or Waking Ned Devine. It's called different things in different countries, but look it up. It's really good.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly, DTG. Like, and Data is only the one who would notice those things. But, you know, he had Beverly, like, go dig up her medical records, like, all of that stuff. So, it's good, but just ethical nope. And,
yeah.
And like you said, Noonien Soong is like, we had issues with him before. We definitely do now. So
exactly.
Yeah, so no worries, Aaron. Our lower sorry, distraction. That's fine.
No.
And Mastime asking, hey, if you're thinking of watching the last Star Trek movie, so the recent one that came out that was in the Kelvin timeline, is the Star Trek Beyond. And then, but the last, this timeline was Nemesis, I believe. Yes. Okay,
I've actually seen that one.
You have actually seen that one in your prep for Picard.
I did, yes.
So the next episode is Parallels. I love this episode. This is probably in my top 5 episodes of all.
This was fun.
Yeah.
This was really fun.
We talked about it in my episode club, the science behind all of this, but this is the one where Worf is coming back from the Batleth competition. And then he's discovering that he's now like transversing from parallel universes. And then he basically is in this alternate universe where he's married to Deanna Troi, and he's like, none of this is right. And they try to figure out, they get attacked. Space-time fissure opens up. They have all of these thousands of versions of Enterprise, and Worf just undoes it. And I love that. Yeah, they're so good. So it's super Worfable as an episode. And then Aaron said, quoted the captain, we're receiving 285,000 hails. You gotta make sure which one's the one I'm supposed to be in.
Yes. Oh my God. That was so fun.
I love it.
And I can't, so was he just trapped, like the main Worf that we're following was just trapped in the Deanna Mary timeline, or did he actually like pop in and out of other ones too?
I think he did pop in and out of other ones when he was cycling back through, and there was alternate endings to the Batleth tournament.
Yeah.
You know, and then it was like when he figured out what was going on, then he was kind of like, okay, something's wrong. And that was the one that we kind of saw the most. But there were a couple where he was with Deanna. There was like, then they celebrated his birthday. They didn't celebrate his birthday. So there was a few different timelines that he was jumping through. And and different cakes. He was going through different realities and different cakes.
Yeah. And the painting keeps moving.
Yeah. So good.
Oh, it's brilliant because he's just like, wait, that was over there.
Yeah.
And like
there's so many great like gifable moments too when, you know, he's like sticks his head around the corner. I had to rewind and watch that again. It was so funny. So funny. And just his awkward birthday celebration, you know, his surprise birthday. And you know, but like his first clue was that Picard was there. He wasn't there beforehand. Like you said, the painting was different. His trophy was different. And I love too, and he was just justifying like his point about the Batleth trophy. It was like, I had that vibe where he was like, let me make this clear. It's okay if I got second place or third or fourth place or whatever. But I definitely remember winning first place. And everyone's, you know, they're like, oh, yeah, sure, you won first place. He's like, no, I won first place.
Prove it to you.
It's really, really, really funny. Yeah. I love just, the invasion of the personal space with Deanna Troi. He's like, so what are you doing here? She's like, I live, what?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So good.
Yeah, and then at the end, Aaron thinks, so you do not live here? What's that supposed to mean? It's so good, but
story.
But I love that like they paired them up, and I think that they just did that more for the humor than anything else, because it was,
it didn't make any sense to me that would happen. But then at the end, he's like, "Do you want to have dinner with me?" And it was like,
it's kind of cute. Yeah, it's just kind of cute. And I never read that. I mean, it can definitely be interpreted as he was like, oh, this might be a thing. But the way, I mean, I certainly more just read it as like, oh, we kind of get along. Like, you know, it's not like we're going to fall in love or anything, but we should hang out more.
Exactly. I read it that way too. And it could very easily be the other way. But it was just like, I always liked their friend chemistry together. Yeah. Like, I've always loved them. And I think he just wanted to cultivate that. And
well, yeah, really... and because with their chemistry, chemistry being their friendship, we've only really seen that through Alexander. You know, that he asks Tiana for help with Alexander. Whereas this is showing that like they can actually have a friendship in their own right as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah, they kind of tried to make it happen, but I think we can kind of back out of it and read it as a friendship thing. But yeah, they are good friends in real life, and it's cool. So it works, and I think it's a funny episode. The one thing that I love about it that I wanted to talk about briefly was I've seen a lot of people posting it recently, but the sort of meme from the Riker from the bad timeline where he like tries to sabotage their repairing it, and he's like, don't make me go back there, I don't like it in my universe. And it's like everyone feels that way right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like so if we had like a fissure open up and we saw all these other universes and everyone else's, you know, situation is totally fine, and we're like, don't make us go back. I don't want to go back there.
That's so true. I also love, like, this was another moment where like they hail the other Enterprises and they're like, yep, so this is normal. Yeah, okay, we'll help you figure out your problem. I'm not gonna
Exactly. I love it. It's so funny. And I mean, you can, if anyone's interested, you can go back and find the episode on my YouTube channel about talking about the science behind this episode. But it's pretty solid. I mean, the way they talk about like this quantum fissure, but that it, you know, fractures open, and you have all these timelines now have a single entry point from this fissure that he went through. And that's how they're all able to interact with each other. And then it works. It's pretty solid. So I like it a lot.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's Aaron. I want to go to Comic-Con. Don't make us go back. I know. I posted a lot of Will Smith from Independence Day stuff last week that was like, I was supposed to be at a barbecue.
Yes.
This was supposed to be my first year as a professional at Comic-Con, and I'm doing it in my pajamas, but
we'll get through it somehow.
We'll get through it. And yeah, they and Aaron pointed out too with P. Stemish's comment, it's like Chakotay and Seven, where they feel like they have to pair people up at the end and it just doesn't work. But I think we all collectively kind of forget about it.
We block that one out because it makes zero sense.
We block it out. So it's like same with this. We just block it out and move on with our lives.
This one I don't want to block out. I just want them to be friends.
This one, Chakotay, with this episode for sure. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's so funny. But get me out of this universe.
Please.
All right. So the next one we're going to talk about is Pegasus. This is the one where Enterprise attempts to recover Pegasus, which has been lost because they were using experimental technology that was kind of Romulan-y in its nature. And this was Riker's first starship posting. So we get to see his captain and kind of interact with him, and it's a good one. I like this episode. So what did you think about this one?
Yeah, I like this episode a lot. Again, I was really into the storytelling of this, and the fact that, you know, it's a great sort of Riker story of growing into the man he is now, and like, you know, you see these characters and you think, oh, you must have always had that mentality or that proclivity, and you know, he was a young ensign and he just wanted to follow orders, and I get that, you know, you grow out of that kind of thing, and I thought that was really interesting that
Yeah.
this was probably a defining moment in him being more defiant. And I loved the note of Picard, like glancing at his application and was about to put it aside, but then saw something about him standing up to the captain. And it's, that was a very conscious decision on Picard's part to be like, I want that type of person on my ship. And that also says a lot about Picard, too, in a good way.
Right. And it kind of touches a little bit on what we saw in the episode that I don't remember the name of, that we talked about last week.
Oh, yeah.
Where Data makes Worf his first officer, or first in command. First officer, yeah. Sorry. Haven't had enough coffee. And Worf is kind of imitating Riker, where it's like, but, Riker stands up to Picard all the time, and Data's like, you can't constantly be questioning what I'm doing. But it shows that, Worf is learning from seeing how Riker and Picard interact.
Yeah.
And trying to emulate that, and that is more it's not a bug, it's a feature, but it's like more of Picard's personality to want to have a deputy who's gonna do that. So it's interesting.
And I mean, again, with the corrupt admirals, like what? That's such a trope that has been going
once again. Yep.
These admirals are just like not nice people, and they're morally ambiguous.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's Terry Quinn. Is that his last name?
Yeah, I think so.
From Lost.
Yeah.
And he's so young in this, and I was like, I know him from somewhere. What is going on? So I IMDb'd it, and it's like, oh, all right, that makes sense.
That guy. Yeah.
That guy.
But it's become a funny, like a genuinely humorous thing about Star Trek that admirals are all trash. Like, except for Admiral Janeway.
Well, we could talk about that
because we've had canon that one ourselves.
But yeah, no, it was a fun episode. I did have a moment where I was mixing this up with the double Riker episode, and it was like, so that event, I kept thinking they had said the word Pegasus, but I don't know that they did.
They did, yeah. They talked, yeah, because that was, he was on the Pegasus, he was stationed on the Pegasus when he got split. So that was like his last posting, Tom Riker had thought that, the Pegasus crew had left him behind and had gone on their merry way.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
I think when they explicitly reference it is when they say, when they get to that planet and they were like, oh, the last time I was here was when I was on the Pegasus, or when you were on the Pegasus.
Okay. So I was like computing that, like, wait, what? Okay.
Yeah, no, you weren't going crazy. That's fine. And remember, the Pegasus crew wouldn't have necessarily, they too didn't think that anything went wrong. They thought that, it was just hard to beam him off of the planet.
Right.
And they doubled the beam. Okay. So they weren't like, we lost a dude. They accidentally made two Rikers.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a good episode. The problem that I have, is that the Pegasus is also a major plot point in Battlestar Galactica. And so every time I hear Pegasus, I always think like evil ship. And it's not. That's Battlestar Galactica. So yeah, it's, oh, hey Dave. Yeah, so they have, sorry, we were geeking out. The chat was going on, which I love, is awesome. I didn't watch the Picard panel at Shore Leave Con, but admirals have always been problematic. This is not a new thing, as Dave pointed out. And
it's just, the higher you go in the ranks, the more
exactly,
the more corruption. That's a bit,
exactly. And then and then this is where they kind of talk about the Romulan cloaking device and this, experimental technology that they have. Which I feel, you've asked the question before a little bit about the Romulans. So did this clear anything up for you about them, or?
Not really, because this was such a self-contained story. Like, but it was a nice sort of tidbit that in the still clearly tenuous agreement, the Federation, part of what they agreed to, compromised to, was we will not develop cloaking technology. And I thought that was really interesting, that concession that, was made. And so the Romulans are still the only ones developing and, working with that. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a neat component of it. And then we can't stop talking about this episode without mentioning Captain Picard Day.
Captain Picard Day.
Captain Picard Day.
Oh,
I'm a role model. Probably so my favorite line from that. And the whole cold open, I went back and rewatched again after I finished the episode. When I love it. Riker picks up the doll and he's just like, well, what are we gonna do?
He just like carries it with him, and Deanna's like, Tom.
It's so funny. It's so great. Yeah, I love it. So good.
Yeah, really sweet. And he's like, I'm gonna make them have a Riker Day. So you have to go through this humiliation.
Right, exactly. And I just love where it's like he's pretending to hate it, and then as Aaron mentioned out, when he's on with the Admiral and she's like, what is this? And he's like, I'm a role model.
Yes.
He loves it. So good. So adorable and
really
funny.
Fun.
And I love it. And something that we celebrate, even though the connection to trying to calculate the star date to make it April, whatever, is it April or May? I forget, because time has ceased to have any meaning. Is tenuous at best, because star date rules is not, they're all over the place. We're trying.
I've been wondering that. I mean, I'm sure,
I know too much about star dates. I know more about star dates than I ever need to know, and I think that it's tenuous at best. But we're trying.
I mean, yeah, somebody's got to have that timeline out there somewhere.
We'll talk about that in the future.
Okay.
June 16th is Captain Picard Day. A lot of fans agree it's the star date of 47457.1, but fans agree. There's not a lot to go on. Yeah, it's just like
my brain hurts literally every time they mention a star date, because it just like 0.1, 0.3, 0.2. Like I'm not a math person, so anytime I hear something that's like a decimal or a really big number, I'm just no, thank you.
Right, exactly. So without getting too much into it, the rule that they came up with for TNG is that it starts with a 4, and then every next digit corresponds to the season or a year. So they started 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, and now we're in 4-7. And then the next 3 digits you can kind of treat like days. So it's like 100, if you're you can then kind of say that maybe in Stardate Land they have about 1,000 days per year that they're in. So it kind of works. Again, I have equations, but it's a mess. It's a mess. But that was the rule that they had. That was sort of the rule that they had for TNG. Was that 4-7, 4-5, 4-6, 4-7. So yeah, good times.
Good times.
Yeah, and Aaron, exactly, that they were pretty much random in the original series. They just told their writers to pick a number and increment it by a day if it's within an episode, and that's it. So,
all right,
guess who gets to figure all that out now? But it's fine. All right. So, any other thoughts on that episode?
Really, another really good one.
It's another really, really good one. It's a nice Riker one. Got to see some of his past, and really liked it. So, Homeward. This is the episode, and I remembered it as soon as they beamed everyone onto the holodeck. That's what I was like, I remember this.
Yes.
This is where they basically get a call that Worf's brother, but his brother from his Earth human parents, Nikolai Rozhenko is working as like a cultural anthropologist, spying on a pre-warp civilization, and their planet is about to be wiped out. And yeah, Aaron put the quote in there about Stardate, so if anyone's interested about the original series, it's all random. It's a hot mess.
Hot mess.
So yeah, so they get a call from his brother, and basically he sent out a distress call, but they're on a pre-warp planet. The planet is kind of dying. It's losing its atmosphere. It's not going to be habitable in a very short order. He's tried to save some of the people without outing himself as a person from elsewhere.
Warp aware.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a weird morning.
And this guy stresses me out. This guy stresses me out. Rule breaking to the max. He basically, when everyone's asleep, beams them all to the holodeck and has recreated their caves in the holodeck and is basically going to convince them that they're walking to a new safe location. And he's like, well, what are you going to do now, Picard? They're on your ship, so you got to find them a planet, and then we'll just make the holodeck match the planet and then beam them down. And I'm like, oh my God, everything about this plan stresses me out because he asked for zero permission. I mean, I get the, like, ask for forgiveness, not permission type thing, but this is way too far.
Yeah, it's kind of extreme. Although, I have to say, sort of a brilliant idea if you're going to do that, if you're going to break the rules and you're not part of the crew, so you're like, your rules don't apply to me. If you have that mentality, again, I'm much more like you on the rule following side of things. But that said, this kind of impresses me, I gotta say. And I think Picard was actually impressed when his acting, like his expression in that scene was so subtle, but like you could tell his brain was working, going, huh, that's works. Actually a good idea.
Yeah,
like,
this can be done. Yeah.
Like, better idea would have been the harder choice to let them die out, unfortunately, prime directive, all that. But since they're in this situation, I could tell he was like, well, okay, we'll try it.
Yeah. And as P. Stemish pointed out, this is an early Penny Johnson appearance. So the woman who played the guy's Nikolai's partner, she is in Deep Space Nine, and then she's also in 24, and she's also in The Orville.
Awesome.
We like her. So yeah, this is kind of her early career.
Nice.
She's really good. And yeah, luckily they found another planet that looks like just outside of Los Angeles.
Luckily, yes.
That's the Class M planet equals desert area outside of Los Angeles. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and they use this plot in Insurrection as Todd pointed out as well. But like you said, Picard's impressed, but it's also one of those things like, I really wish you'd asked me so I could have thought this through. Whereas, like, now I have no option. And can I also point out that Nikolai is a terrible anthropologist. Like, he's sleeping with his subjects, and he's, like, massively interfering in their ways about it. This is like nature documentarian rules. It's like, let the antelope get eaten.
Yeah, exactly.
The planet die. The planet is gonna die. That's the rule. But not everyone is as lawfully aligned as we are. So Dr. Ina agrees. Thank you, Dr. Ina. Yes, couldn't deal. Can't deal.
He was very problematic, to say the least.
But I do think it's we're talking about that within the story. Outside of the story, it's a good way to have an innovative prime directive story.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think this would be one I would suggest anybody watch who's new to Star Trek and wants to watch a prime directive episode. Like, I think this definitely fits that bill.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. 'Cause it's a self-contained story too. You don't really, other than you going, wait, how are they brothers?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's solid. And I mean, even, my partner was asking me when we were watching this, he was like, this isn't his Klingon brother, right? And I was like, yeah, no. Just because kind of having it on in the background, listening. I was like, yeah, but this is the brother he grew up with. on Earth with his parents, whom we love, the Rozhenkos. I wish we
We
could
love.
see more of them. Yeah,
I know. They're my favorite.
they're
Favorite.
fabulous. But you know, but we can't also point out that maybe the reason that he's a crappy anthropologist is because you know, he didn't get into Starfleet. So but that's just me being judgmental. And thank you for the follow, Oceanic. Yeah, it's Kirk's anthropology sex. Yeah, that's the philosophy of how we interact with other species. Good Lord, stresses me out. But it's a good episode. I like it.
And I liked seeing Worf and him kind of reconciling at the end.
Yeah.
Was nice.
Yeah, for sure. It's really good. And I like that he lectures him. They have very distinct personalities where he's basically, I mean, Worf has always consistently been lawfully aligned as well. And he's like, bro, you're stressing me out. This is not okay behavior. Not only that, but I'm getting indirectly blamed for this because you're causing chaos on my ship. And it's a stressful episode, but a really, really good one. I do really like this episode. We got to talk real quick about the scribe who basically gets off the holodeck. And that is a sad storyline.
It is, but I kind of liked that they went that way with it because in the past, like in some of the Voyager episodes, and I think maybe one of these episodes, people who the pre-war person who gets pulled into the Enterprise is, I always think of it as when it's a positive, like I always think of it like that person was meant to be there, meant to have this science in their head now to go back, and they'll slowly work on getting their culture as far as they can in their lifetime, you know, from this knowledge that they received that they weren't supposed to have, but they have a scientific brain, so they go and try to make that work as much as they can and educate where they can to implant that, so then that culture then eventually in centuries later is able to develop, you know, warp drive and all that. But in this case, I kind of liked that they said that's not always going to be the case, that he was just so overwhelmed with thinking he's going crazy and what is this about, and like it ultimately made him, you know, kill himself. Because he just couldn't deal with the pressure of not being able to tell his people and
not wanting to keep it secret.
And not wanting to keep it secret, and not being interested in trying to develop this as much as, you know, as he could in his time.
I like that a lot. I'm going to come back to that. So Oceanic mentioned, I'm glad you like the Janeway GIF. But yeah, the Star Trek Online storyline, I need to play. I've mentioned this on Twitter. I'm afraid of MMOs, and I'm terrible at flight simulators. So the flying part of Star Trek Online stresses me out, but I definitely want to play it because I've heard amazing things about those, and I know some other people are doing it. And then Mikhail, thank you for looking up all the spot details.
Yes,
thoroughly appreciate it.
It will be.
I'm very glad that you were here as well. I'm really glad that you were able to be with us today. But yeah, so the other ones that jumped to mind when you mentioned that you saw this in TNG and in Voyager. The TNG one where we saw this was with Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens, where they brought him on, and he was basically like, rock and roll, people, like, I got this, I'm here with you, I will help you out, like, I'm mental notes all the way. This is cool. And then the one in Voyager, the reason I can pull this out of my brain is because I talk about this all the time, is the Blink of an Eye episode, where they watched the civilization unfold under them, and then they tried to go visit the star in the sky, and one of the two scientists survives, and they send him back down, and he helps them escape. But you're right, it's a really good point that all of those people, and you can read it as being like, that's part of their journey, it's part of their character, and it advances the story, and it's intentional in its purpose. And then this one is a unique way of doing it, that he just genuinely didn't see an out. And that kind of broke my heart, because he did seem so dedicated, and I think that's why Picard struggled with it too, is that he seemed so dedicated to truth and to, you know, documentation stuff, but he just felt like he would never catch up, and he didn't have a place and couldn't go back, and so that was his only option. It's a dark ending, but it's appropriate. You know, I think it's good. So
I loved in this episode that little moment when Worf was like, "It is the sign of LaForge."
Yeah.
It's like LaForge is like, "I got you, Worf. I got you."
It is the sign of LaForge. That was so good.
The lights mean that it's a sign.
That was so great too, and I love when it is flickering like near the very end, and it's really destabilizing, and they're like, "It's a storm. Our seer will, you know, guide our way," and Worf is kind of like, "Can you make it lightning and thunder?" And Geordi's look, he's just like, "Yeah, I can. Let me make a storm."
I'll do that for you. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it's really good. So we're not ending it on the sad note too, but it was funny. I had that thought because I deal with tragedy with humor, when that guy was struggling, the scribe was struggling about staying or not. My reaction was like, if I was him, I'd be like, "So can we stop walking now then? Like, if it's all fake, do we have to walk the whole way?" But yeah, but it's a good one. So
it was a really good episode.
Yeah. All right, so we are at the top of the hour, but thank you all for joining us. If this is your first time here, we had a new follower and some new names in the chat. Welcome. You can find links to past episodes on my YouTube channel, and the link's down below that. And I'm pulling up what we're going to talk about next week. Yay. Which I never remember to pull up. Yes, agreed, Oceanic. I think the Ron Moore episodes are fabulous. And then once we're done with this, Samantha's gonna watch we are all gonna watch Deep Space Nine for the first time together. So the next episodes we're gonna talk about, some people might have known this was coming. We're gonna talk about Sub Rosa. I'm so sorry. I am gonna spoil this for you so I could see your face before you actually watch this episode. So we're going to watch Sub Rosa, we're going to do Lower Decks, Thine Own Self, Masks, Eye of the Beholder, and Genesis, and then we will finish TNG the next week. So we have 2 weeks left of TNG. So Sub Rosa, enjoy watching Beverly Crusher have sex with her grandmother's boyfriend's ghost. Have fun!
Fantastic!
Yeah. It's the worst.
Good times. Okay, I have to tell you, I knew something like this was coming because I knew I hadn't seen it because I watched the bad trailers Next Gen.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And he mentions that like several times, and it's the thing he mentioned at the end. I was like, I'm pretty sure I haven't seen that yet, and my god.
Yeah, and Masks is pretty terrible too, but Sub Rosa is, at the very least now, it's like, I feel like that's an initiation, because it's right at the end of TNG, and it's so awful. It's so awful. I promise though, I will make myself rewatch it as solidarity. So, it's fun. It's delightfully awful.
All right. Can't wait.
Exactly. Yeah. Aaron, that is a great summary of Masks. So we'll watch that. Can't wait to talk about it. So we'll be back next Sunday at 11 o'clock Pacific time to talk about those episodes. I am going to be taking the week off from my episode club. I will be streaming a little bit tomorrow morning, just playing Mass Effect. And then I will be part of Virtual TrekCon, Cosmo Questacon, and another one that I forgot about. I have 3 conventions next weekend, which honestly is the only shining light in all of this, is that I would never be able to do 3 conventions in one weekend. So it's going to be fun. But anyway, check all those out. You can find my Twitter page down below for links on all of those. So, all right, with that. Thanks, Samantha. This was fun.
Thank you. This was fun.
All right, awesome. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Have a good time. Bye.